What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Forward to Extraordinary, a part of the Strictly from Nowhere podcast experiment. I'm your host, Justin Abrams, a serial entrepreneur in pursuit of wisdom with the goal of sharing it with all of you. And today is no different. Before I get started, I always like to do this. Where do my guests come from? I love that James Callister and Wonderfish are in my life. Like, yo, slam dunk, high five, my man, give me a call later. But he also knows what I'm really looking for, and like a genuine curiosity about how folks are innovating and finding little niches in the world. And we see constant things in repetition, especially in software land, startups that look like a little wrinkle of each other, and nobody seems to have anything like totally novel. And so I'm always looking for folks that have some type of a change, some type of a new way of analyzing the world that we live in and want to make some software out of it. And so today, my guest is building something that like I haven't really ever thought of. I think there was like a Black Mirror episode or something like that. That might have been something in this vein. We're going to talk all about it. Kiko Zang, founder of Chomp, welcome to this episode of Forward to Extraordinary. I can't wait to unpack your zero to market story.
Thank you for having me, Justin. And I always think art precedes technological innovation. So if you see it on Black Mirror, chances are like 10 years later, it will happen in real life, right?
Kind of cool, right?
So maybe we're too early. Maybe I'm too early. And then we can also talk about the things that you haven't seen before. Do they get funded or do they not? So that's actually a pretty interesting journey that I've had, getting funding and like building something that a VC do not have the ability to pattern match. How do they price you? How do they fund
Sure.
you? That's an interesting
Right.
topic as well.
Well, let's get all into it. Before we get into business, I always like to humanize this just a little bit. We're one and the same. We're all trying to figure out our way. We all have a heartbeat. And so I'd love to know a little bit about you, your backstory, and what makes you unique.
I think what makes me, I wouldn't actually answer a question like that about what makes me unique. I actually think we're all very similar
Yeah.
under our shells. But I can talk about where I'm from, how I got here at my South Jersey home.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
So I'm Kiko. I'm Chinese. I actually grew up in New Zealand though. So when I was 12 years old, my parents were like, we don't want to change your personality, but you are a little bit too anti-authoritarian for being in China. So let's like find a place for you. So they sent me to boarding school in New Zealand. And I was there
Wow.
from age 12 to 17. That's where I, learned this language that we're speaking now. And that's where I actually started getting into jazz, which like we just talked about previously.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Chinese parents, they're like, you can't study jazz full time. You have to you have to apply yourself and take lots of math classes, etc. So I also applied for colleges and I ended up going to school in LA. After that, I worked for 2 years and more in LA for Mattel, which is the Barbie, Hot
Cool.
Wheels,
Yeah, sure.
company, and then for Deloitte, the consultancy. And then you might have heard of the H-1B visa lottery.
Of course.
So when a skilled worker, is trying to stay, there's government lottery. So I didn't get picked 2 years in a row. And I was like, F you, America, I paid taxes for all these years. That's okay. I ended up going back to China and I stayed there for about 7 years. And I split my time building educational products and then also working for a company called IDEO, which is a US-based company that leads human-centered design and uses that to do systems thinking, design thinking projects. And then I actually spent 5 years in crypto most recently. That's how I met Tiff, and that's how I like kind of learned about like the startup world because
Sure.
I joined a friend of mine as their first business hire. We raised $19 million. I led a team. We scaled it over to 30 people and then fired some, etc. I left as their COO end of 23, early 24 to build a startup that I have today.
Wow, you've been through a lot. That's like probably one of the best chronological overviews that I have received on the show right out of the gate. You've been through a lot of stuff and all sorts of like what feels like not necessarily related categories, but what is the relationship between the roles that you've had? Like how are you mapping back maybe crypto to Mattel? What's like the core skill set that you feel like you really bring to the table?
Yeah, so I think I spent a long time wondering if I need to be more of a specialist than a generalist. Like, early on in the career, they always ask you to like pick a field, stick to it, climb up the ladder, etc. That was never my interest. I think I somehow got by in the early times in my career by just being resourceful and bringing people together. And then I realized that's actually a specialization in itself. And it's just a business operator. And my specialty is communication making unlikely connections between people. So like in corporate terms, that's like aligning stakeholder expectations, right? But really it's just bringing people together, moving things forward, and finding like unlikely kind of connections between people and subjects, and like supporting win-win situations. I think that's my specialty. Deal making, I would say maybe that's one way to call it.
Now it's starting to like come into focus as to like where the idea for Chomp kind of came from.
Okay.
I don't want to spill the beans here. You'll do so, but like it's starting to make a little bit of sense to me, like where because I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting you to answer that the way that you did. And now it's like your general curiosity about how do people actually interact and like what actually causes deal flow and what is actually meaningful to people. That's like a really interesting thesis. So take me from the top. Where did the original thesis of Chomp come from? And then try to help me understand what does Chomp actually aim to do for the world?
Yeah, so I alluded to that a little bit in my upbringing and like why that is my curiosity, right? So I grew up across 4 different continents. As you can imagine, like a 12-year-old going to a boarding school in a different country, people are more vicious than you think. I went to an all-girls boarding school too. My parents are like, "Oh, that's the safest environment for you, all-girls boarding school." They did not know that teenage girls are a little vicious, right? Um, but I always saw this like pattern of people being really afraid of what they don't know, right? And there's like a lot of like people grouping themselves into categories, and then people building. I think what I heard, I might be misquoting this, but it's something like ideas become beliefs, opinions become beliefs, beliefs become identity. And once it becomes
Mm,
your identity, it's really hard to shake that. But it started with just an opinion. So maybe the opinion is, um, I don't know, like there could be women are more emotional, right? Or maybe the opinions is like things that are made in China are cheaper. And that ends up becoming like something that you hold really dear to you and you refuse other types of understanding. And I saw that throughout my entire life, in how people interact with each other, and also in corporate America where like people are unwilling to like accept new ideas and move into things. But I've always been able to find what motivates a human more intrinsically, and kind of like maybe the more startup term is like building back from first principles, right?
mhm,
Understanding what drives a person, what motivates them, and then kind of helping situations move forward by allowing the stakeholders to shed their identities or their belief that they held before. Um, and a lot of that has to do with like understanding what people actually think and realizing that we don't want very different things from each other. We all want to be heard. We all want to be seen. We all want to be loved. We want people to validate our ideas, right? We want things to go well. There might be different identities or different definitions of what good looks like or what success looks like. But if we aren't even talking about the same thing, there is no way to kind of like have a conversation and measure that. And one of the problem that I saw actually in the last 10 years, and also especially coming back to America, is that people are not even willing to have conversations in a shared reality anymore. Men and women dating is especially hard today, right? Men and women seem to be living in like completely different realities, super different expectations, for the opposite gender. And politics, don't get me started, right? Like families are broken apart because they believe in different things in the political structure. And there seems to be this driver towards putting you into these like more and more isolated realities, or like silos, chambers, whatever you want to call it. And we first identified it as a incentive problem, actually.
mm,
And the reason that this is happening is because the more you are driven by extreme fear or extreme validation, which is like, if you think about your algorithm, it's like things that you're like, oh, I can't believe this happened. Or, yeah, I agree 100%, right? These are the things that sells ads. So the more you watch that, the more social media or Google or whatever platform gets ad dollars. Because if you are not buying the product, you're the product, right? That's like the general saying. And because of that, information that is being presented to us are not incentivized for our consumption and for our understanding. They're incentivized for us to be more and more into these silos so that we can spend. So imagine like you are on the subway and the person sitting next to you has a completely different set of like explore page algorithm than you, how, like, even though you're sitting next to each other, you have completely different realities. And there's a lot of ripple effects to that. And I think that that initial problem is what Chomp is built on, because we see this not just as a incentive problem, but incentive problem creates a societal problem. It's harder to date. It's harder for people to gain alignment. It's harder for people to find common ground because they don't even have a shared reality to have common ground over to begin with. So Chomp is tackling a pretty large problem, which is like, how do we bring people back to a shared reality? And how do we measure the difference between perception and reality on aggregate? Because that distance in between is what we're missing when we look at information that exists today. But that distance is causing a lot of divide in society and how we understand our customers and how we converse and connect with one another.
I find it like a really interesting thesis actually, because like, person to person, you use like the subway analogy. I'm sitting next to somebody else. Person to person seems like actually a harder mountain to scale than business to business. As a business owner, I'm always actually interested in what is the reality that my customer goes home with and what do they say when they're not in front of me.
Yeah.
Kind of like the like a golden rule of doing business is when they're not in front of you, are they praising you? Are
Yeah.
they bad mouthing you? Are they willing to refer you? And so you do everything in a business to try and figure out, how can I nurture those relationships? How can I give somebody the best experience possible so that they're most likely to evangelize us? But in
Mhm.
reality, I have no idea. I'll give you for example. I put out a mass amount of volume content, like a huge amount of content. I have no idea if I have a customer currently that doesn't agree with a guest that I had, with something I said, with how I present myself, with the amount of volume. Maybe they think it's cringy. Maybe they think it's incredible. Like, I don't even really know. And you can ask into your face, they tell you, but what are they actually really thinking? And so when I was talking about Black Mirror, I think we all remember that episode where everybody's walking around with a phone and they're like rating each other. I'm going to give you a 5 star because you were so wonderful at the coffee shop. But the second I walked away from you, I start shit talking you or whatever it is. Like, the actual reality about how we engage with each other. And then you brought up like the dating arena. Talk about the dating arena, human resources arena, kind of like the same, like in this one-to-one experience that we're having. You might have like a different perception in your brain of like, how is this conversation going? I mean, how many times have you had a conversation where you're like, oh, yeah, get me out of this? In your brain, you're like, get me out of this. But in the conversation, I'm like totally baiting you. Let's continue to talk. Like, yeah, here's my business card. I love you. Let's get a coffee. And
Yeah.
so I wonder, first of all, how are you even gonna, like, don't give me the sauce. Somebody else could recreate your experience here, but like, how do you envision collecting this data and sharing the real reality?
Yeah, I actually have a story about the dating thing, which I can talk about later.
Whenever,
Or I can talk about it now.
whenever you're ready.
Have you heard of the Whatever podcast?
No, but maybe I should.
Like, you've probably seen the clips. So, like, there's this guy, and there's like a panel of 10 women sitting around. And then sometimes the clips you get sent is like, he will ask questions like, what is the capital of Japan? And then they will be like, Nicaragua or something. Like, they'll say something dumb.
Okay.
So it's like, it's one of those like clickbait content podcast.
Yeah.
But he has close to 5 million followers on YouTube. I actually went on that podcast to debate him. And I realized that his audience really have a completely different set of belief and understanding about how dating should work, or like how women and men, like how gender dynamics should work, compared to like my friends and my conversation. Like, I had friends
Sure.
support me, and halfway through they're like, sorry, we can't watch this anymore, Kiko. Like, it's making us so angry. Um,
Wow.
and that is like existing in like same age range, right? Like same set of like socioeconomic status, but just completely different beliefs. And imagine someone watching a podcast that demeans women, or like has these like more traditional values, or like whatever you call it, and then dating a girl who like her entire feed is like, divine femininity, right? Um, they're not gonna be able to have a conversation
Hmm.
because they don't even allow each other's worldview to exist in their reality. It literally doesn't. So that's just a side comment. But coming back to how we're doing it, We actually have an API, by the way. So like if you're curious about what people think, you can actually just use our API and like build something on top. But we are it's a very simple mechanic. So the sauce isn't really the mechanic itself. The sauce is more in how we grow the distribution and like how we can get people to be interested in our loops. Um, but very simple. There is a set of papers that we found that was actually written by two MIT postdoc researchers. They're both teaching, one at MIT, one at Wharton. I'll just stop there. But they had this really interesting and elegant algorithm for wisdom of the crowd. So we just built on top of that and built a set of like scoring mechanic and kind of like a game loop and products on top of that. So we are in touch with the original creator of the algorithm. And then we're also like inventing and iterating with our own scoring system on top. But it is based on a very, very simple two-step process. For every single question, maybe for your question is, did you even like this host? Or did you even like this guest? Or something like that, right? But for like a dating person, it might be like, this is a question we actually ask, which is saying I love you in the first month of dating. Is that a green flag or a red flag? So I would take that question and then every person who sees that question will give their answer. Like maybe I'll say like red flag, which, most people will say is red flag, maybe. I thought. And then the second answer is how many people do they think will agree with them? So first answer is my reality, what I think. And the second answer is my perception or my prediction, right, in a way, but that is grounded in my perception. So I think maybe 10% of the people will agree with me, or 90% of the people will agree with me. And then the algorithm takes those two inputs. So we technically have four inputs, right? The first input is individual reality. Second input is individual perception, or first order, second order belief. And then we are also able to derive a like aggregate first order and second order belief. And we calculate a distance in between those things.
Hmm.
And our algorithm doesn't always resolve to majority because we're looking at what are some things that no one expected to happen, but actually people secretly believe. So that's the sauce. So if you can track that algorithm down, we have our own scoring and we're constantly improving our scoring. For the previous version of our product, we put an incentive layer on top and then we experimented with crypto incentives. So like, what if we can infer how honest you are in your understanding and in your input, and we incentivize you based on how honest you are, and that allows you to be consistently honest in your answers. Then we can get much better outcome and much better understanding of what people actually think. But then when you put incentive in play, you also invite exploitation and manipulation. So we ended up having to alter our algorithm to remove clustering, to remove bad actors' incentive to like game, to get more payout. So for the new version of our product, we're actually removing the incentive layer. We're still scoring everyone's perception under the hood, perception reality gap under the hood. But we are making a play for anonymity as one of the key drivers. And then the ability for you to see what people actually think with these like more high tension questions as another key driver. And we're targeting women between mid 20s to mid 30s, people who have natural desire to like see what others really believe, who like maybe want to gossip a little bit, and yeah, see what happens there. So the distribution of like creating this game loop and creating high tension questions where people want to like yap about and discuss with their friends and come back every day. That's more the secret sauce.
Hmm. So interesting, actually. It's like, well, first of all, I think I said I love you to my wife. Maybe within the first 2 months, 17 years later, I think it was a green flag.
Right.
You
So
never, I probably would have
so
answered like that too. I would have been like, yo, I don't say that very often, but that like just came out of my mouth. I didn't
yeah.
even mean for it to happen. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Some
And the answer we got was 97% of the people said it's a green flag.
so interesting, right?
It's much higher than I thought because conventional wisdom will be like, oh, say a little bit later, I don't scare them off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All secretly want to be said, I loved you too.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
And for it to come easy, like it
Yeah.
just fell out of my, like she was getting into her car and going to work and I was going to work and I was just like, I love you. I'll see you later. And she's
Yeah.
like, wait, what? It was like classic. But I think that's really interesting because the perception, like we all have that. The perception is like if that comes out of your mouth a little bit too early, it's a little cringe or a little off
Yeah.
putting or like a little too assuming or maybe that's not actually true. And this is a really easy one. Like my brain's kind of going a million miles an hour about where could this data actually be valuable.
Yeah.
One of the difficult things that I actually is candidate feedback in the hiring flow.
Hmm.
Like, how do candidates do not get constructive feedback from hiring managers? You
Yes.
just go through hundreds of roles, you get no feedback, you try to put your best dress on, and like nothing. Like you're just not making progress. And so I'm really interested in like what's the anonymous feedback. Most interview processes are multi-layered, maybe multi-day, maybe there's take-home experiences, maybe there's in-office experience, lots of different stuff. But like, where's the actual real feedback? Like hurt my feelings because in the feedback is growth. So that's number one. And the other one, which I think is really for you and for me, is like investors do startups have to speak to before somebody finally takes the ride with you. And it's like they don't really tell you a reason why, like, oh, maybe too early, doesn't fit in our portfolio, like it's just like not the right time, like check back with us when you have a little more product market fit, like whatever thousand different ways to hear no. But none of that is really constructive. And like, what is the actual gut feeling that's happening around the boardroom table? I'm sure we could find a million additional sectors of where reality actually matters for growth. But I'd love to go down the path with you for like the investor route, because I know that's a big piece of your story. So kind of tell me how all this is coming into play and how you're positioning the business for interest like that.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of interest on the B2B side. When we first launched the V1 of our product, we won a global hackathon right away. And then we had a lot of like engagement, mostly from crypto projects because we're testing crypto incentives, right? And I think we had about 50 different business partners because they just wanted to know what their audience thought. So they're like, oh, can we launch a deck of questions? Can we launch a pack of questions with you? Maybe it's about like our product. Maybe it's about how people feel about BTC. Maybe it's about, oh, we're shaping this like NFT character. What do you want his personality to be like? So it's a very low lift, but high engagement way to get what people really think. And there is a lot of value in people wanting to find out what others also thought, honestly. So we saw this like very natural, like kind of consumer like curiosity as well. But what we also saw was if we launch a standalone consumer product and we had a bunch of business like survey questions in there, our consumers get fatigued really quickly. They're like, oh, then you have to pay me money for that, right? Then you have to sell me something. Whereas we actually have always had this mechanic where people put a stake in first. So like in our old version of the product, similarly in the new version, there's actually a buy-in or like you subscribe or you like pay something because that payment also indicates your commitment to
Sure.
like think about what you're saying, right? So when that is the mechanic, and then you have a bunch of like B2B things in here, our consumers didn't like it. So we ended up like like having like a very different balance, like 90% consumer friendly questions, like more fun, more engaging, more everyday. And then maybe we share some of that insight with the businesses, but anonymously, of course, like we remove any PII. And then maybe 10% we will like put into like more business specific business use cases in the product. Um, I think there is potentially a B2B path for the product. That's why we have the public API. But the thing with building a startup is uh, there's a lot of key stakeholder risk if you end up having a lot of B2B dependencies. And is also a much more fun space to play if you're building consumer tech. At least for me, coming from being at IDEO, learning about human-centered design, I have a lot of desire to do qualitative reviews, interviews, and to understand real consumers. And like my history, right? I just want to know what people think. And humans, when it's not a B2B desire, humans are more fickle, right? They're more like complex. They don't really know exactly why they're doing certain things. So I think it's a better practice and a test of our muscle to try to understand them and build for them. So I definitely picked the more challenging route, but it's also a high risk, high reward. If you can get a consumer product or multiple consumer products off the ground, that's your own distribution network that no one can take away from you. And imagine in a more agentic network in the future, a agent, if I'm a girly, right, and I send a text message to ChatGPT, and I'll be like, is he into me? Right? Here's a screenshot of the text. Right now, ChatGPT will appease you, right? Sure, or like try to give something, but
Totally.
actually, ChatGPT doesn't know what people of this age demographic actually thinks. But imagine in a future network, ChatGPT is immediately sourcing that and posting it as a question in one of our distribution networks and getting real human feedback. So then the answer changes, right? The answer to the girl will be like, actually, boys in that age demographic tend to answer this way when they're feeling these things. So then you get like a more human-like answer and a more precise and accurate answer for the end user. So that's how we're imagining it in the future. But coming back to the investor thing, we haven't tried to pitch this product to a investor network, but I do agree with you that there's really no incentive for an investor to be very honest with you because they want to wait and see if someone else is more interested, right? So they can like follow on. I've actually seen different investors try to build these vibe code these web apps for themselves, where it's like, oh, who was a better investor? Or yeah, mostly like who's a better investor, but they don't really want to openly rate the projects.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
Of
that's
course.
one of those, like, I think it still needs to be gated a little bit. And then for investors, even though they're venture capitalists, they're really like FOMO capitalists, right?
Yeah, right,
A lot of
right.
them.
So true.
So they need to see a lot of traction elsewhere most of the time
Yeah.
for them to want to like build on us. Of course, like I'm generalizing here. We have Chomp has raised a seed. We've raised $3.6 million so far, and we have really, really good investors. And I'm really blessed to like have investors I can call up and I trust. But I don't think they're the typical ones that you see kind of yeah, in these like VC speed dating conversations of today.
Yeah. I think that that climate's evolving too, interestingly enough. There's like more of domain level interested parties, in like the angel space, folks that have either been there or have a curiosity or, don't have the same rigor of deploying capital because the goal is not necessarily the same. Yeah, we definitely see that. And I like what you said about, the VCs are really FOMO capitalists. That's what we see too. It's like, if you can figure out how to get one, they seem to all show up, but then no one's willing to make the first move, which I find really interesting. I play this game with my wife occasionally where it's like, what would be your superpower?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And her superpower 100% of the time for as long as I have known her has always been, I want to know what people think. I want to
yeah.
know what people are thinking.
She's
Mine
our
is
top
not.
user.
Mine is like, I want to like put my hands on somebody and heal them, take their pain away or like literally heal them. Different. Um, but hers is always about like this interest of like, what do people actually thinking? Not
Yeah,
necessarily about her,
yeah.
just like what is going through someone's mind while they're
Does
being
she
quiet.
does she watch Bravo?
Does she watch Bravo?
Or what's her favorite show?
She's like a Game of Thrones girl.
Okay.
We just finished Friends and Neighbors. She's like we started rewatching Heroes last night. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
anything kind of in the Marvel superhero arena. That's all in our house. I mean, she's got tons of interests, but I
Nice.
don't like that.
So I've always watched TV as a way to like understand different types of realities.
Sure.
And, like usually when stories are like a lot of people who share this type of interest as her and I watch a lot of reality TV shows because it's a way to like see how other people are having drama without being a part of the drama themselves. And
Right.
it's still a way to understand, like kind of like speculate, understand what people really think. So I would love to interview her as a potential user interviewee if you're open to introducing me. But
Yeah. Not.
but yeah, so that's the type of thing, right? People really want to know. And in our next product, which is targeting, I think, women in her age range, also my age range, we have this thing that helps you understand how well you can read the room. So
Mm,
like you can see like, okay, I'm amongst the top 10% of like predictors that got what everyone else thought like correctly. Or like this is my blind spot. I did not see that coming at all. So like when people are answering these questions about like, we talked about a dating one, another one could be, uh, would you cheat on your partner for $100,000? So like she might be like, oh, like I wouldn't do that, but I feel like, 52% of people will say it. And then she gets to see if she predicted that correctly. So that's the game mechanic. Like you're is like I'm really glad that you're bringing up your wife because like all the wives are our target users.
Yeah. I imagine. It's like such a fascinating thing is like just the general premise of like what is actual reality versus perceived reality. I had
Yeah.
a uh I had a mentor and a manager and somebody I still really respect and work with. And she would always say from like the customer perspective, I was in client services for basically my whole career in sales and business development and marketing. And like the perception is reality. And
Mm.
like that's most people's Achilles heel. Reality is not necessarily perception, but like trying to re-educate somebody, like redefine what reality means is a change of their actual perception. And so I find it really interesting. You're basically crowdsourcing reality, like what topic X, whatever topic X is, my brain goes to, first of all, every single person's lives, the accumulation of somebody's lives, their thoughts, their feelings, everything that they experience, everything is on this phone. Everything. Everything we do. It knows every single thing about us. Not to mention it might even be listening. And so my wonder in the future is like, is this all happening in the background where something's happening proactively for me, which is like, hey, you're going to this event, you're going to this networking event, or I'm going to South by or something like that. I see it's on your calendar. I already know who you should meet. I already know who you have a likeness with, who you're aligned with. Connect these people. And I see a product in the market right now. I don't know if you're aware of Bordy, but I
Yeah,
see
I
like
use it.
Bordy is right. So I do too. Like I see it like starting to happen where there's like this strategic alignment that we're all looking for. I don't want to. Repetition is really hard. They're just going out and taking the reps and hearing the no's and trying to find your people and your true conversation. That's hard, man. That's just a slog. And so where's like kind of the gamification of this experience? Like the device knows everything there is to know about me. Who out there is like a direct, perfect alignment looking for me, cousin Justin, or looking for you, Kiko? Like those funnels are going to be slightly different. So I definitely have a fascination on how this works and how the big data is used. And I'm sure you see like a large data solution and data provider probably, and like all sorts of really cool evolution for the business. You know, we started with our conversation even before we got on the show together, talking a little bit about jazz and being a musician. And I often refer back to being a musician from the perspective of either being a guitarist or a drummer. And I kind of think about that from building a business. And so I wanted to talk about that just for a little bit because, man, being a drummer day one, you sit down on the kit, you can play. Might not be beautiful, but you can have a good time. You can like make some sounds. You could just wave the sticks around and like have a good time. But to become like truly a masterful drummer could take years, decades of your life. Like you either have it or you don't. Guitar is kind of like almost opposite. Most people can't just sit down with a guitar on day one and do anything. Like your brain is just not wired to move that way. But eventually, like you get the chords down and you can make some really cool music. You could show up at anybody's campfire and you could rock on a guitar if you just master the basics and get over the initial hump. And so we were talking about jazz a little bit and like the chaos of jazz and trying to combine a band and a sound and kind of everybody's doing their own thing, but everybody has like this fine line that they have to just maintain. And that kind of is maybe a weird dotted line that I'm making to like the chaos of our realities and like trying to find this like central line that we all kind of tap back into. And so I wonder like what's your perception? Because I know music was a big part of your life, like so much so you had to get it tattooed on you. That's no bullshit. And so where do you see the connection from like that truly creative outlet and the chaos of jazz into like what you're trying to do, which is a central line of normalization and data?
Yeah. I think the most interesting data are the ones that you can't standardize and quantify just yet. So 2 plus 2 equals 4. When we couldn't figure that out before, it was interesting. Now that we know the answer, it's like, what, right? We didn't know if Earth was flat or round. Now that we, to a reasonable degree, believe that it's round, it's like no one is investigating that problem anymore. My hot take is that everything was an opinion before it was a fact. Every fact used to be an
So true.
opinion, right? And it's the most interesting when there is a high tension debate, when there are different opinions at the same time. Um, but usually, like if you think about prediction markets, or if you think about like more scientific stuff, usually people don't know if it's a fact or if it's more settled until like a
Sure.
real life event happens, or like some like new scientific discovery happens. But what about the things that you just can't quantify? Like the things you can't measure right now? Like, how much do you like what do you think about kind of dating? What are your thoughts about religion? Like, is morality on a decline, compared to 10 years ago? Where is America going? Who's going to win, America or China, if it's in a real battle? Like, a lot of these questions are opinion based and belief based. And our algorithm is pretty much on this quest of iterating and training and perfecting itself to be able to standardize and quantify qualitative information. And that's the through line, is the things that I think are more beautiful and more interesting in life are the ones that are hard to measure. But what if we can create a new standard to measure these things and present them in a way that's easier for people to consume? So that was like the reason behind calling it Chomp. So the company is called Gator because we're an information aggregator, and Chomp because first alligators chomp, but also we want information to be more bite-sized, more digestible, and not only in the way we create or acquire information, which is like through these gamified experiences, but also in the way we kind of consume, label, and then represent that information in a way that's easily digestible. So you didn't have an understanding of how everyone thought about the Real Housewives. And now with our data, you do. You didn't have an understanding of how people thought about the gender divide. Now with our data, you can see that distance between perception and reality. And all that is doing is to help people make better decisions in their lives. Maybe maybe before decision, they can feel they're less alone, right? The thought that they had that they never said in public, other people feel it too. Or the thought that they had, they're more unique than the rest of them. These insights can be actionable in different scenarios. Um, yeah, and I think that's what we're doing. In terms of like music and jazz, I think creativity is a very large part of like why, at least for me, like I wanted to come into building a startup. So I've paid a lot of attention in creating different artifacts and brands that people will resonate with and respond to. And I firmly believe that for consumer product, having a relatable brand and a relatable symbol or a character, if you will, um, can can drive a lot of motivation to intent to purchase or intent to like use the product. So that's where my creativity has been channeled into. So I don't know if you see
Yeah, yeah.
the plushie in the background. It's a little bit
Yes.
far, but I made that for the last version of our product. It's called Chompy, and that like first started to build out our product, a lot of people didn't understand this algorithm that we were designing and like all these buzzwords, right? Similar to you, they're like, what is this? What is this thing? But they love Chompy. Like they love this character. They put it, we had a user who crocheted Chompy like of her own and took a photo and sent it to us because we couldn't mail one to her. We had users who put Chompy on their birthday cakes. So it was a way to create a symbol that consumers love as a way to kind of lower the barrier of entry. They're willing to participate because they want to see Chompy. They want to see this character and therefore they're in the app more, right? They get different artifacts. They want to be friends with Chompy. And that allowed them to, that bought us more time and gave us more time to educate them and help them understand what this product is about. And yeah, I think that's what art is meant to do. Art is supposed to inspire, create curiosity, maybe something that an artist thinks about, in Black Mirror or in anywhere else becomes reality because it intrigued someone and inspires someone and it drew someone in.
I really like that. You have a co-founder?
I did. I don't have it anymore. I don't have him anymore. We wanted different things and we recently decided to part ways.
You know, if it's too painful, we don't have to talk about it, but I think that there's great wisdom in knowing when it's appropriate to part ways. That question could have gone one of two ways. Like, tell me what the secret is between you and a great relationship with your business partner, or tell me where the wisdom comes from to know when it's time to kind of go your separate way. You have to imagine that there's going to be some people listening to this that are having a similar
Yeah.
contemplation. And so I'd love your perspective if you're open to it.
Yeah, some of it is NDA'd, but I can talk about just making decisions in general and my learnings about making a decision as a founder.
Yeah.
Um, so in the last and by the way, if anyone is like watching this and they're contemplating being a founder, my take is I highly recommend being an employee. I
Yes.
actually think being an employee is a great deal, right?
Yes.
You don't have
Totally.
to think about it 24/7. You don't have to bear the burden of like when to pay your team members. And you don't have to think about like what does a good boss look like and like the tension between being a good boss versus being a profitable boss or being like, a person that like whips the company into shape and
Mm,
pushes it forward. So I
amen,
definitely have
sister.
yeah, I've learned a lot though in the last 2.5 years. And I think the biggest learning that I had is how much I made decisions out of fear. Uh,
Mm,
a lot of us and this is why social media sends you all these like fear bait, rage bait, right? Uh, there's a lot of things that we do that we aren't doing because we truly want to or we think is the best thing to do. We're doing it because we're afraid of something. We are afraid of being embarrassed. We are afraid of things not panning out. We are afraid of making a mistake, right? We're afraid of failing, like all, whatever fear that we have. And um, I went to this female founders retreat a few months ago, and what I learned there, I keep asking myself every single day. So there's this workshop called the Confidence OS workshops. Like, go figure, a lot of female founders struggle with confidence, but not just female, right? Male as well.
of course.
When you're building something either on your own or with a partner, and you don't have a boss anymore, who's going to tell you you're doing a good job? Especially in startups where a good decision can still lead to a bad outcome, right?
True.
You really don't know what a good decision really is until maybe like if you stick it out like years down the line, potentially you might know. And like any decision could go either way. There's a lot of like no right decision
Of course.
scenarios. So how do you make those choices? I noticed that a lot of times I made a safe choice, right? I kind of channel into a more scarcity mindset and I made the choice that allowed me to fail less or like bought me more time. But what I learned at this workshop is that um, they first told us to remember a time where we were 10 out of 10 confident. So for me, it's actually like moments with my husband, right? So they're like, okay, write down this moment, remember it, channel it. So then before you have to make a difficult decision, always ask yourself, if you were 10 out of 10 confident at this moment, would you make that decision differently? So oftentimes when I try to ask myself that, I realize that the answer is yes, I will make that decision differently. I would choose something else if I had no fear, if I was confident that something is going to work out no matter what, right? And I just think this is the right thing to do, and I'm not afraid of the consequences. So that's how I made some of my recent decisions. And that's, yeah, I think,
Great wisdom.
and I thank you, and I something else I learned, which I didn't like, is that, there was this research, and the researcher, they said, as much as we don't like to admit it, research is showing us that confidence trumps competence is the number one leading indicator for success. And that's not how I was raised, right? We're raised to like, at least for me, to like keep our heads down, work hard. Someone's gonna discover that we're like this really talented person and like hand us something. But really it's about just going out there and doing it and like having your confidence and yeah, doing it scared or doing it imagining that you have no fear. Yeah, so that's what I have to say. And I think when it comes to co-founder compatibility, what I will also say is sometimes like people grow together or they grow apart, similar to relationships, any relationship. And like my co-founder separation felt like a divorce, right? It was a painful thing. And I still have a ton of love for him. But sometimes something that is valuable to you, even as a person, as a friend, may not be the most valuable thing for the business. And as a business is changing, it needs different things. But not everyone ends up evolving to that thing. And I think if two people are mature, they can have a conversation about it and they can work something out. Um, but if you are thinking about bringing people in and you're afraid of that potential happening, then I would not believe what YC told us, which is like everyone having 50-50 equal partnership and like know what your stake is at the company and know like if you want to continue, right? Know what does it take to either continue holding on to that stake or increase your stake. Um, yeah, so that's my suggestion, my two
It's
cents.
really good advice. You know, when I was brought up in a household that was kind of a combination of the both. It was like pursue competence, because it's gonna come. Someone's gonna challenge you and you can't be an idiot. You could bark your way into whatever room you want. You could like show up super confident. That's great, but like that doesn't last for very long reputationally across a career. So like we definitely double down on confidence. But I was always brought up with a quote, which was be your own advocate,
Uh-huh.
which is like kind of a wrinkle on being confident. It's like not being delusionally confident.
Yeah.
It's like understanding that I put in the work, but that I'm in a line of people that are equally as qualified. And so how do you stand out? How do you speak up? How do you show up? Like how do you carry yourself? How do you give people this feeling that like you're the right bet? And that kind of comes down to a lot of what we've been talking about for today, which is the combination of confidence and competence. And I think that that's probably a really great way to close up our conversation. I have one final question for you, which is hopes and dreams. Like, what do you hope for Chomp? Like, in a perfect world, this all goes well, adoption looks good, find product market fit, you guys hit traction, find profitability, all of these wonderful things happen. We can only hope. What do you expect and what do you hope for and what do you go to sleep at night as like a battle cry in here that keeps you motivated to show up every day to make Chomp work?
Yeah. Um, so imagine there's a graph where every individual is a node, our beliefs is a node, and the strength of our belief are edges. And we're not connected just because of our socioeconomic background, our demographic. We're connected because of the strength of our belief. Other people believe in the same thing or different things. Imagine that being how you get introduced to each other, right? So like one day you're like, Justin, there's like two other people that are completely different from you. You would have met them after otherwise, but you happen to align on this very specific question.
I
So like,
need
what do you
this.
think about that? So, or it's like you are very similar, but you disagree on this one thing, and there's high
Mm.
tension to discuss that. So that's where I think Trump is going. It's like using this belief graph that we can map out, using this belief engine to produce more accurate understanding of what people really think, and then bringing people together based on that graph. And I would love for people to be connected on Chomp. I would love for the information that we create to be more accurate than what is on Google today, what is on Wikipedia today. I would love for information to be funneled through this understanding of more accurate and more honest version of reality. And I think that is the layer that should be underlying our internet today instead of like only performative information. Um, yeah, I think with a more honest layer of what people really believe, there's a potential that we can bring people closer into more common grounds, into more shared reality. So that's kind of what I hope for.
You said something before. It was kind of in the co-founder conversation, which is like you either grow together or you grow apart. I wonder like how many families fell out of balance and alignment simply because like we're so much consuming a different reality.
Yeah,
Like there's so many nights that like, my wife is watching TV and I'm like doom scrolling LinkedIn looking for the next lead. And like our realities could not be further apart. And so I'm interested, like you're way macro. You're like way in the macro. I want to like fix this at the internet level. And I'm like micro. I'm like, I want to like make sure I'm like staying in alignment with my wife and my
yeah,
friends and my extended family and my
yeah.
children. And like,
And that's actually how we pivoted into this direction because we were building in crypto and we saw a lot of crypto bros bringing their girlfriends on. Because
yeah,
like the crypto bro is like chomping these questions and like telling their girlfriend, and she's like, I would answer differently. Doesn't know what I think. People
you're right. Of course.
and then he will be like, "Get your own chomp." And then they will like I interviewed multiple couples when we had a live app that were chomping together every single day and discussing the results together, and it
I like
brought
that.
them closer. So, like, if you have this product, remember HQ Trivia from many
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Same time, every day, people just came
Yes.
together and they looked at the same set of questions and they had the same shared experience. That's on a consumer level what we're trying to achieve with Chomp as well. And we actually see like another our interviewee said, after college, her and her girlfriends just like moved to all different places, right? So they have this group chat, but they don't really know what exactly to chat about. And this has become like something that she's really excited about. So like she can just throw a question in. I saw this on Chomp today. What do you guys think? And
Mm.
it's a way to like invite conversation and bring people closer together. We don't need to get to the building this graph level for Chomp to have the ability to invite conversation and bring connections together. So for us, the pattern is revelation, conversation, and connection. So revelation is realizing that perception and reality are different, or realizing that you're not so different or you're not so crazy as you have thought. Conversations what comes after that realization. And that just naturally brings people closer together. So I love for you and like anyone who's watching to like try Chomp and see if it brings your conversations to a different level.
Well, I put my email address in on your landing page. By the way, I love your headless site. It's like beautiful. It's like
Shout
ripped
out
scroll
to
from
Violet,
the
our designer, for
Yo,
putting.
shout out to Violet. It really is. It's like an enjoyable scroll and it's got like all of popular culture just staring you in the face. I really liked what you guys put together. It's good taste. And I
Awesome.
love the idea of like building a brand with a personality that's outside of the founder-led experience. I kind of love what you did with your plushies and like giving this a brand identity and an experience that people can kind of rally around. Very often these conversations bring up something that you would be remiss not to talk about. And I would hate to get to like the debrief after our show and for you to be like, damn, I wish we would have talked about that. So now's your time, Kiko. Anything come to mind?
Oh. So I also didn't come to this call with like an agenda. As I mentioned to you, this is my first thing. So it's like a tester. I actually wanted to say that your podcast is bringing people together. So you interviewed James, who was doing a clipping business.
Yes.
When I was studying, like preparing a little bit, I saw his business and I had a call with
I
him
love
earlier this week.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I actually think it's really fun to have these conversations and thank you for having me on and thank you for making it such a comfortable environment. I think we're for Chomp, we're also trying to create that environment that's like intimate, low friction, and like allowing people to be honest and just be themselves. And uh, I am really happy that I'm in this room.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And Kiko, I wish you forward to extraordinary.